An equation that includes a radical sign is considered a radical equation. The radical sign or signs must be removed from the equation in order to solve for the variable, which is usually x. So this would be an example of a radical equation. The square root of 4x squared minus 13 is equal to 2. So we have an equation. We have two expressions with an equal sign between them. And we have a radical sign. This would also be an example of a radical equation. The square root of 2x plus 7 plus the square root of x minus 1 is equal to 4. So I'll walk through how to go about solving each of these types of radical equations. But before we jump into that, we first need to discuss the difference between radical form and exponential form. The radical form of a term includes a radical sign, and the exponential form contains a fractional exponent. So these two terms have the same value, they're just written differently. Again, in radical form, we have our radical sign. So this value, we have our base, which in this case is our radicand, a. It's being raised to a power of m, and this power m is being divided by the index n. In exponential form, this would be represented by a fraction, so it's a to m divided by n. So using this, knowing that this is the exponential form of a term, we can see how we go about removing a radical sign. To remove a radical sign, you want to raise both sides of an equation to the power equal to the index. So if we have our term a to the m over n, we want to raise this entire term to a power of n. Why is that? Well, again, in exponential form, it would be a to the m over n. And now when we raise this to another power, this term multiplies against this exponent. So this n negates this n, leaving you with just m. So this cancels out the radical term, leaving you with what's just underneath the radical sign. So if we look at it with actual values, if we had 7 to a power of 3 halves, it would be the square root of 7 to a power of 3, which in exponential form would be 7 to 3 halves. And then we raise that to a power of 2, since our index is 2. Those 2's cancel each other out, leaving you with just 7 to the third, which is the term underneath the radical sign. If we change our exponent and our index, we still go about removing the radical sign the same way. This term would be 7 to a power of 6 over 3. So you would raise both sides of the equation to a power of 3. This 3 cancels out our index 3, leaving you with just 7 to a power of 6, the term underneath. And no matter what values you plug in there, the index could be 4. 7 to a power of 6/4. Raise both sides to a power of 4. The 4's negate, leaving you with just 7 to a power of 6. So throughout this video, all of the examples would be square roots. The index will be 2. But if you are given questions where the index is something else, the only thing that changes is the power that you will be raising both sides of your equation to negate that radical sign. Okay, so keep that in mind. So now let's have a look at a radical equation and how we would go about removing the radical sign from this equation. All right, we'll save how to solve the variable for later on in this video when we get to sections 4, 5, and 6. For now, we're just going to focus on removing the radical sign. So let's say you were given this radical equation, the square root of x squared minus 7 plus 13 is equal to 8. The first thing you want to do is isolate the first radical term. So you want to take all the other terms on the same side of the equation as the first radical term and move them to the other side. So in this case, the only other thing on the same side of the equation as our radical term is this constant, positive 13. So step 1, subtract 13 from both sides. That negates this term, 13, leaving you with just the radical term on the left side, the square root of x squared minus 7. And on the right side, you now have 8 minus 13, which would give you negative 5. Now, once you have the radical term isolated, we want to take advantage of the fact that the index is 2, so we're going to raise both sides of the equation to a power of 2 to get rid of this radical sign. Now, in exponential form, again, remember this radical is the term underneath to a power of 1/2. It's this term to a power of 1. It's not shown, so it's a power of 1. It's just itself. So that's this. And the index is 2, so that's the denominator 2. Okay, so a radical term with an index of 2, you raise it to a power of 2 because 2 times 1/2 would be 1, leaving you with just the term underneath, which would be x squared minus 7. Isolate the radical term, so we subtract our constant 13 from both sides. Once you have your radical term, you then want to raise both sides of the equation to a power of 2, since the index is equal to 2. That cancels out the radical sign, leaving you with just x squared minus 7 is equal to 25. And then you will be able to proceed from there to solve for the variable x. Again, we'll solve for the variable later on in the video. Just want to review how to remove the radical sign. Let's have you do a few practice questions. Remove the radical sign from each equation. Question number 1, the square root of x minus 8 is equal to 3. Question number 2, the square root of x squared plus 5 minus 3 is equal to 2. And question number 3, the square root of x squared minus 1 plus 6 is equal to 4. Pause the video, solve these questions, and then press play when you are ready to begin. Step 1, add 8 to both sides. This is to help us isolate the first radical. So that leaves us with the square root of x on the left side and 3 plus 8, which gives us 11 on the right side. Step 2, raise both sides to a power of 2. Since our index is 2, when we raise both sides to a power of 2, that negates that radical sign, leaving you with just x on the left side. 11 squared would be equal to 121. So once you remove the radical sign from this equation, you're left with x is equal to 121. All right, we'll discuss how to check your answer later on in the video, but for now, we're just discussing how to remove the radical sign. Let's take a look at question number 2. We had the square root of x squared plus 5 minus 3 is equal to 2. We want to isolate the radical term. So step 1, to negate this constant, we want to add 3 to both sides, leaving us with the square root of x squared plus 5 on the left side of our equation, and 2 plus 3, which leaves us with 5 on the right side of our equation. Step 2, we want to negate this radical sign by raising both sides to a power of 2. That 2 negates this index of 2. When we do so, the radical sign is removed, leaving us with just x squared plus 5 on the left side. And on the right side, we have 5 squared, which should be equal to 25. So once we remove the radical sign from question number 2, you are left with x squared plus 5 is equal to 25. Question number 3, we had the square root of x squared minus 1 plus 6 is equal to 4. To isolate this radical term, Step 1, subtract 6 from both sides, leaving us with the square root of x squared minus 1 on the left side of our equation, and 4 minus 6, which is equal to negative 2 on the right side of our equation. Step 2, raise both sides to a power of 2. When we do so, the radical sign is removed, so you're left with x squared minus 1 on the left side, and negative 2 squared is positive 4 on the right side.